So, you want to be an ESL teacher in 2021. If you're asking yourself this question, this is the video for you. The video is going to be broken into 6 different parts. The first being, what qualifications do you need for ESL teaching? Next, we'll go into some of the pros and cons of both online and offline teaching. Next, we'll figure out where can you actually find these various ESL positions. Then we'll talk about what might be the best age range for you to teach. And then we're going to ask a really difficult question, but an important one, which is, should you actually travel in 2021 for ESL education? And to wrap it up, we'll just talk about some of the differences between public and private ESL schools. All right, well, no more chit chat. Let's get out there and let's jump first into qualifications. Okay, so here's the big thing with education. What you need to know is that it really depends on where you want to go. Typically, the safest thing you can have is a TEFL or CELTA, which is an English teaching certificate, as well as a degree. Depending on the country you go to, that might be a requirement for the visa. For Korea, you only have to have a degree, but if you want to teach in a public school, you have to have a TEFL with the degree. TEFL is not something to worry about. For those of you who saw my first video, you'd know that I started in South Korea. And when I was there, I only had my degree. I didn't have a TEFL yet or a CELTA. Because it was a private school, their only requirement was having that degree. But after they transferred me to Vietnam, that changed. And in order to get a work visa for teaching English in Vietnam, I had to have a TEFL. I did mine online from a company called Bridge, and it only took me about 2 weeks. Obviously, I was doing it every single day, but it was simple, it was cost effective, and it really helped me. It helped me with lesson planning and learning how to teach different levels. So now that we're done talking about the education requirements, let's jump into the real world work experience. Now, I'm not going to tell you that every school is going to give you an opportunity just based on your education, because that would not be true. I've had numerous opportunities, especially in the last year, because of my prior experience. But saying that, my first chance I got to work overseas was straight out of university. Next, let's move into online versus offline. First, let's start with the pros for online teaching. The first being, you can work from home. This is great. I mean, obviously not having to go to an office can be a benefit depending on the lifestyle you want. Second pro is a flexible schedule. Depending on where you're working in terms of your online work, you might be able to change your hours and modify it more freely than you would in another situation. The next pro would have to be no location restrictions. I know people that teach all over the world, but for an online school. And the last real pro to me is full control of your classroom. Of course, having a digital platform, you can control a lot more of what's shared, how people interact with each other, and this can be really great if you're working with especially young learners. Now let's talk about the pros for offline teaching. The first is travel opportunities. Being able to travel all over the world is amazing, and depending on what kind of school you go with in terms of ESL opportunities, you might get to go to the other side of the planet, which is super cool. The next benefit would have to be an immersive classroom experience. By this, I mean you're actually there with the kids. You can have them do art projects. You can use a lot more physical movement. You can actually have group activities. So these sorts of things can be copied in an online classroom, but it's not the same as an offline one. So definitely a benefit. And of course, the last one to me, which is really important, is you actually get to leave your house daily. You have an excuse to go somewhere, which I think is obviously a great thing. Being able to have a place you have to go every single day that's outside your home is definitely important. All right, so now that we're done the pros, now let's talk about the cons, both online and offline education. First on cons, let's go to online. The first con for online would have to be a lack of human connection, both in terms of having a human connection with your students as well as your peers in terms of your co-workers. The next con would have to be odd working hours. I mean, if you're working in Canada and you're working for a business in Asia, well, you're going to be up at really weird times of the night and usually sleeping during the day, which can definitely have an interesting effect on your personal relationships in your home country. The next con would have to be classroom restrictions. Obviously, when you're working on an online platform, you're going to be a lot more limited in terms of what you can actually do with the students. Now let's get into the cons for offline teaching. The first con is going to be location restrictions. Obviously, if you're working for a business that's offline, you actually have to go physically to that school and be there in person, which depending on what you want to do, might not be optimal. The next would have to be more strict working hours. Of course, if you're on contract with a school in a foreign country, you're going to have to really make sure that you are committed to their schedule, which also might increase in terms of the number of hours. first place I recommend all teachers to start is Dave's ESL Cafe. It is a third-party site that was started by a foreign teacher, and many businesses from all over the world post there. There's 3 different main sections. You've got the Korean job board, Chinese job board, and international. The search icon is super easy. If you're looking for online, I recommend typing in either online or remote. Both those typically bring up different opportunities. And when you're going through each category, do some research on the recruitment agency as well. Depending on the country and how much involvement the school has, the recruitment agency might be handling all the communication between you and the school, and also between you and the government getting your visa. So it's really important that you make sure that the recruitment agency that you're going with is reliable. So with all that in mind, the big thing to remember is to do research. Schools have all different kinds of reputations, and whether you're doing online or offline, it's important to do your due diligence. Check out Reddit, go on different blacklist sites that have really interesting reviews on different schools. Don't believe everything you hear, because anyone can say anything, and it's important that you corroborate any accusations or anything you hear about that school. But if you hear that a bunch of people have quit working at the school and that a lot of people are unhappy, chances are that's not a place you want to go or a school you want to be at. Moving into age, there isn't really a right equation or a simple answer to this question. It's totally dependent on you and your own personal experiences. The best thing I would recommend is actually do some tutoring before you leave to different age groups, because this will help you figure out who can I help the best. And also think about what subject you're going to be teaching. I mean, obviously if you're doing kindergarten or elementary, it's going to be more based around grammar, syntax, phonics. But if it's older students, you might be looking at academic or business English, or one that is growing in popularity, which is one of my personal favorites, conversational English. So all you need to think about in terms of age is who can you help the most, and who do you think you're going to be able to communicate with the most clearly. Next, let's get to a very pressing question: travel in 2021. So in 2021, a year that's definitely still impacted by COVID, should we be traveling abroad to teach ESL? I think that's a very difficult question to answer. I would say that for myself, working remotely is the best option, and probably will be for a long time. But believing that the world's gonna all of a sudden be ready for travel this year, next year, even the year after that isn't realistic. So I would say that as long as you're doing your research, you're making sure you know what the travel restrictions are, both in terms of the country you're leaving as well as the one you're going to, that take the risk, go for it. If you wanna go do some offline teaching, there's no time like the present. Things aren't going to improve for a long time. So the big thing is just do that research and get out there and have fun. Okay, and our last category is just going to be talking a little bit about private versus public schools. Obviously, my experience is limited in this because I've only ever worked for private schools, but the one thing I will say is I've got friends that have done both, and there's ups and downs to both sides. In a nutshell, you're going to be teaching a lot more students typically in a public school, and it's also a lot more regulated, which can be really great if you're not looking to have your hours change that much. So if you're looking for a very consistent schedule, lots of visa support, and a very clear path, public is the way to go. But on the flip side, private schools typically pay more, and that can be really great if that's something you're looking for as well. Public just doesn't have the resources to pay their teachers quite as much. Okay, so let's wrap it up there. Definitely a very complicated subject. I hope you found this helpful, and please comment below if you've got any advice, stories. But the big thing I think that we can all take from this is that ESL teaching is great. It's a solid industry, and it's just continuing to grow. So get out there, do your research, have fun, and I look forward to seeing you guys in the next one. Have a great day.